Well, the announcement was supported by the MP for Rutland and Melton, a member of the Foreign Affairs Select Committee, Alicia Kearns, who joins me now. Alicia, it's always great to have you on the show. Thank you for your time. I mean, first of all, then, these sanctions, 5 banks, 3 wealthy individuals. I mean, it doesn't seem like a lot, does it, Alicia?
I mean, I was very clear with the Prime Minister yesterday in the Chamber that I want him to go further. These are important banks. You know, these are Putin's military banks. They are Putin's Black Sea banks. But I think we needed to go a lot harder, a lot sooner. And yesterday I said to the Prime Minister that I wanted him to blacklist all Russian banks. I also wanted him to make sure that accountancy and law firms and all of the city is not servicing Russian state companies. And I thought that should have been our first essentially our first approach, our first vanguard.
So with this then, Alicia, doing things like that, these sanctions, they need to go further. And that's what you're saying this morning.
I am. And ultimately because Putin has crossed the red lines. He has torn up the Minsk agreement and he has in essence said that he is going to invade. These are not peacekeepers, these are paramilitaries. And so we need to send a collective message across the world that we will stand strong, because for 8 years now, that is how long there has been war in Ukraine. There have been no meaningful consequences, and Putin has gone further and further and further. So I want to see more financial measures. I also want to see us working with looking at military things. So, for example, we should work with Turkey to restrict Russian Navy access to the Bosphorus, and we should be looking at export controls. But finance really is the heart of this. And I know the Prime Minister said, we have to go incrementally. We should have given a hard shot to start. And then I promise you, I have a list of many escalations that we could bring in if Putin doesn't change his course.
Are you worried? Is there any point, Alicia? The Russian Foreign Minister, Sergei Lavrov, he's brushed off these sanctions. He's labelled them as predictable, saying that the West would impose them regardless of events. Is there the danger here that this could backfire?
That's Lavrov's job. I've sat in the same room as Lavrov at Syria peace talks. His job is to undermine, to mock, to make other people look silly. That's exactly what his playbook is. They are worried. We know that sanctions work. Look at Iran. That's why Iran's back at the table when it comes to the nuclear deal. We know that sanctions will hurt. We need to stop exporting our technologies to Russia. We need to make sure that we're banning the city at all from servicing Russian state companies. We need to go after the oligarchs' families. We need to stop educating their children in our country. And then at home, we need to protect ourselves better. So a Treason Act, a Counter Hostile State Act, more better documentation of who's really buying up properties in our country. And there are so many more ways we can escalate if we need to. But anyone suggesting that Putin doesn't want us to go after their money fundamentally misunderstands the man. That is why he protects power. That is why he holds on to it. It is all about protecting his own ill-gotten gains.
Is there as well, kind of like lots of people talking this morning saying, look, if we do this with Russia, if we impose these sanctions, now the fact that these diplomatic situations are out the way and aren't going to work, that this is just going to affect our petrol, our oil, things like that. How do you feel about that, Alicia? Is this going to hit us in our pockets in the long run, do you think?
Look, you can't infantilise the public. Absolutely, this will have an impact on us at home, but it will have an impact on us because of Putin, not because of us taking action. You don't say to the bully, stop beating up my child in the playground and I'll give you a lollipop. Ultimately, this man is breaking international accords. He is waging war, and what he does will impact us, because when he invades Ukraine, which he currently plans to, we will see refugees at our doorstep. We will see bloodshed, we will see women raped, and that will, without question, affect every single economic market there is. So any suggestion that sanctions we're doing now are wrong, this is about protecting the British people and taking the side of democracy and peace and stability and the people of Ukraine. And I was there 3 weeks ago on the border in Donetsk. These people want nothing more than to be able to live their lives freely. And yes, it is right that we choose a side, and it is right that we stand by our allies.
And Alicia, as part of the Foreign Affairs Select Committee as well, I can hear the passion in your voice there. I mean, what are you hearing from Ukraine? Saying that you were out there 3 weeks ago. What are people telling you?
The reality is that people in Ukraine have lived under war, under threat from Putin for 8 years now. He has been illegally occupying territory for 8 years. We went to the very front lines, the last Ukrainian-held building on what's called the contact line in Donetsk. And life has to go on, and they've been focused on rebuilding. And all my conversations with the local government there was, what support can the British government give to continue to rebuild? But, while we were there was sniper fire. We had to walk a very particular course where we wore our Kevlar to make sure we didn't walk on any mines. There had been shelling of a building. Someone had been shot only a few days before. They have been living at war. And it is unfair that for 8 years they've had to live their lives constantly waiting and nervous that Putin could do this. And it is amazing the resilience of the Ukrainian people, really. That was the main thing I took away, their resilience. But also from whether it was a taxi driver in Kramatorsk or a restaurant owner in Kiev or a villager in Donetsk, the feeling was the West will decide if we live, or the West will decide if we're invaded and we die. And that, to me, is a deeply depressing state of affairs when they recognise that is the only option that is in their hands.
And Alicia, you've got a better grasp on this of many of us. I mean, how worried are you right now?
So I have to say, for a long time, I didn't believe that Putin would press the nuclear button and that he would go in. Apologies, I shouldn't say that. I didn't mean a nuclear weapon. I didn't think he would invade. Over the last few months, he's won a lot. He's essentially won tacit acceptance of the illegal occupation he already has. He's been able to expose the fault lines within the West. He's been able to demand the equity on the world stage that he wants. Putin is desperate to be seen as equal to Biden in the US on the world stage. I saw it in 2016. I'm seeing it now. I didn't believe he would go this far, but now I think with the announcement that he did of recognising independence, of having torn up the Minsk agreement, I think we have to very much assume, and we've always worked on the basis that he really would invade, but unfortunately now my concerns are absolutely as grave as they could be.
And Alicia, as we look at the front pages of the newspaper and certainly hear what you're saying as well this one, I mean, there's this kind of sense of powerless that we're unable to do anything, that the general public, that we're not able to. Is there anything that we can be doing? Is there anything we should be doing, Alicia?
I think I understand that feeling of helplessness because even as an MP, I feel that to some extent, which is why I'm pushing so hard for meaningful efforts to stop Putin, and why I think there is a very clear map of escalation should he continue. But I think actually the Ukrainian people want to hear that the British people support them. And when I was in Ukraine, the main message I received from people on the street and from MPs and businesses and the government was the UK has been our best partner throughout all of this. And we should be proud of that. But ultimately, we all need to keep ourselves educated and make sure that we don't help the Russians actually by spreading disinformation and, these ridiculous things we're reading about how Ukraine has always been part of Russia, or Putin, or that NATO is aggressive, or NATO is the aggressor. That is just not true. And if you say that, you are essentially dishonouring all those Ukrainians who've already lost their lives over the last 8 years and over the last few weeks. So I'd say to everyone, please make sure you're as educated as possible. You don't support that sort of narrative. So,
Alicia, with these escalating scenes, you said there about your grave concerns now as well. What would be, today, this Wednesday, 23rd of February, what would be the hardest sanction that we could hit Russia with today that would make a real difference?
So there are a list of 150 oligarchs and their families who could be sanctioned immediately, I believe, who are responsible. So I'd like to see that happen. But it's mainly what I called for yesterday when I lobbied the Prime Minister. Blacklist all Russian banks, blacklist and ban the city from servicing all Russian state companies, and that includes accountancy and law firms. We need all those Magnitsky sanctions on Putin's oligarchs, and we need to work with Turkey to restrict Russian Navy access to the Bosphorus, cut them off from the Mediterranean. Those are the immediate things I'd like to see.
Alicia, thank you so much for your time this morning. MP for Rutland and Melton, a member of the Foreign Affairs Select Committee, Alicia Kearns, joining us this morning here on BBC Radio Leicester.